One to the Raging Waters Safe Harbors podcast. My name is Kevin Peridot. I'm your host in this space. I'm glad you are joining us today. All right. Not sure I have any housekeeping business today. Simply will draw your attention to maybe I do want to say this. Life is always moving very, very quickly, incredibly quick. Kids are growing up. We're all getting older. I've been spending some time walking at the Winchester Cemetery, and it's crazy because I know where my family members are buried, and then seeing people's graves that I did the funerals of. There's a bunch of them that are. It's weirdly enough kind of on the outside loop of the cemetery, and I've been seeing a new one every time I go, and seen a couple people I went to high school with. Their graves are there. It's sobering. It's sobering and it is grounding. And I really think it comes back to, again, trying to make the most, or let's not even say try to make the most of the day that we have, but doing all we can to be fully present in it and not to get caught up in the distractions upon distractions that we often are drawn to. So that's the housekeeping business today. Stay present, stay with the people you love, pay attention to what's going on, and yeah. So let's jump into chapter 5 here. So let me. I think today I'm going to take a little different approach. Sometimes I kind of go through the chapter, then let you see what's there. I want to go ahead and tell you what is coming because it's not going to. The big picture of what's being stated, it's not going to take any of the surprise out of what's actually happening in the text. But I want you to see it so you can have it in mind. So last week, we ended in the end of chapter 4. We had Jesus leaving the crowd in a boat. There was a fierce gale of wind and waves breaking over the boat, so much the boat was filling up with water. Jesus was asleep. They're like, "Hey, do you not care that we're perishing?" He rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Hush, be still." And the wind died down and became perfectly calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith?" They became very much afraid, even after he said, "Don't be afraid." Interesting enough. Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? And so our first story of these, there's in chapter 5, we're going to get the last 3 stories of kind of this section. This story is the first story. And basically, what these stories are proclaiming, remember, someone is reading this for the first time and they know nothing about who Jesus is when this was originally written. Therefore, and only 5 to 10% of the people during Jesus' day could read. And so they were hearing this. Therefore, you wrote so that what you wrote could be heard. And what's going to be heard in these 4 stories back to back, just like last chapter, we had those story after story, parable after parable about the seed and how the seed is connected to the kingdom of God. Here we're going to get 3 stories in chapter 5 and 1 story in chapter 4. And the first one is going to say Jesus has authority over the physical world, the elements, wind, waves, water. He has the ability to command them and they listen. Period. The next story is going to be about a person possessed by a demon. And we've seen this before, but this one's kind of drawn out and we get to see a lot more details. And so we're going to see again that Jesus has authority over the spiritual realm. Okay? The third story are kind of overlapped. Jesus is on the way to heal a girl that's sick. And then he gets touched by a woman who has a disease, an issue with bleeding constantly. And so we see that Jesus has authority over the body. that disease and whatever goes on in the body, Jesus has authority over it. And then finally, in the midst of this woman touching Jesus and Jesus being delayed, the the little girl dies, and then Jesus raises her from the dead. So we see that Jesus has authority over even death. And so as you're hearing this for the first time, if you were hearing this for the first time, it would be kind of a roll call of sorts of what this guy can do. Okay? So he's doing these amazing miracles. The wind, the waves obey him. The spiritual realm bows to him. The body and disease cannot overcome what he wants to do. He has authority over the body, and he has authority over even death. Okay? So this is the picture that Mark is painting through the stories that he's sharing. And the reason they're stacked up like this. At least that's my assertion. You can make your own decision. All right? So we've hit this one. Let's jump into these three stories in chapter 5. So they came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gerasenes. When he got out of the boat, immediately, see, I'm staying over here in the New American Standard, so we're going to get this immediately language where it shows up. Immediately, a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. Unclean, impure. The NSAB, the New American Standard, seems to favor unclean, whereas NIV uses impure. Same thing. So unclean spirit met him, and he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with the chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken into pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. So again, if you were in this town and you were dealing with this would be some major things to deal with, right? Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and gashing himself, with stones. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." Okay. So the guy that's screaming cannot be subdued. Seeing Jesus, ran up and bowed down. So already all the signals are the one who is walking among the tombs and around this area, Jesus, has more authority than the unclean spirit within this guy. He says, "What business do we have with each other?" And he knew who he was. "You are Jesus, Son of Most High God." Just a question to ponder here, my friends. I don't have I have a thought, but I don't have a full answer, so I won't even share it with you. But how did the demonic spirits know who Jesus was? Like names him by name, and knew that indeed he was the Son of the Most High God. And he implored him, "Do not torment me." So he knew, this unclean spirit knew that it had met its match in Jesus, and that Jesus had complete authority. There's no give and take, like maybe the demon was. No, like the demon is submitting to Jesus. And the reason he said, "Don't torment me," is because Jesus had started saying, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And he was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." I will never forget, side story. I can't read this verse without ever thinking about this. I remember Bible college is a weird and strange place, my friends. I mean that in the most loving way, but I went to Bible college, and I remember being in a class, and it was my freshman or sophomore year, and there was this gentleman, And the professor was going around and saying, "What's your favorite verse?" And one of these guys, I know who it is, I'm just not going to name him. But anyway, he said, when asked favorite verse, he says, "Oh, Mark 5:9 for sure." And everybody's like, "Mark 5:9." Everybody's doing, and everybody looks it up. And they're like, "Really? My name is Legion for many." Anyway, he was messing with the whole class. That's who this guy was. But anyway, my name is Legion, for we are many. So this is, remember back a couple chapters ago, we talked about the a house divided against itself, and in the longer passage in the book of Matthew, which we before we started into Mark, we talked about, that there was, if you sweep the house clean, but you don't, you get permission for these things to come back. Anyway, they come back in droves, and there's many, not just one, but many impure spirits going on in this person. And he began to implore him earnestly, "Do not send them out of the country." Now there was a large herd of swine feeding on a nearby mountain. The demons implored him, saying, "Send us into the swine so that we may enter them." And Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. Couple things here. Why did Jesus allow this to happen? Why did the demons want to go into pigs and then kill the pigs? No clue. No clue, unless it was to simply torment and cause more havoc in the community which they had already been causing havoc in, the unclean spirits. You see what I'm saying? But why Jesus would let this happen, I'm not for sure. This is one of these questions that have always kind of stood out to me. So I'll just leave it there with you. But I will also say that this place where Jesus was hanging out would have not been a good Jewish town. That's the best way to say it. If they had 2,000 pigs in a herd, and pigs were unclean animals to the Jewish folks, this would not have been a Jewish place. So just another thing, little piece we know about who these people are. The herdsmen ran away and reported it to the city and in the country. And the people came to see what happened, and I'm sure there was literally dead pigs floating all about, which would have been quite a scene. Then they came to Jesus, observed the man who had been possessed, sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, and the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. So one of the typical responses, let's say this, to seeing Jesus exercise his authority in one of these ways seems to be they were frightened. The disciples, when Jesus calmed the sea, they were frightened. The people, when they saw Jesus, had cast these impure spirits out, and that the man who used to be screaming and going all about the tombs and could not be changed, could not be subdued, now sitting clothed in his right mind, they became frightened. They were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them how it happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. And they began to implore him to leave the region. This is too fantastical, magical, supernatural, scary. Our properties being harmed, our livelihoods being messed with. This guy that was such a torment is sane now and is not, but we're just scared. Why don't you just get out of here, because we don't know what's next. Okay? This is always interesting, verse 18. And as he was getting into the boat, Jesus, he is the he there, the man who had been demon possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. And he did not let him, but he said to him, "Go home to your people. Report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you." And so he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done, and everyone was amazed. And so, again, Jesus does not just simply take this guy, but he sends a witness out to proclaim these things. And this guy's story had to have a lot of credibility with it. Okay, so that's the first story. Excuse me, the second of the four. But he's got dominion, authority over the spiritual realm and everything in it, and everything in it bows to him. Okay, that's it's crazy that the spirits, the unclean spirits, know who Jesus is, and not only know who he is, but bows down to him. It's it's crazy. It's crazy. So practically speaking, let's think about this. Like what? When Jesus shows up in our world through people, how is that authority? How do we see that authority playing out in God's people? How should it look? Anyway, I think that sometimes, I guess what I'm getting at here is sometimes I think that this line gets skewed between I'm a helpless sinner who can do nothing is at one end of the spectrum, and at the other end of the spectrum is what the New Testament calls us, which are saints. And again, not saints in the Catholic way that we got to get 3 miracles and so that we can achieve sainthood, but we're saints. We're called to live apart and different and holy lives. And I wonder, because of the skewing, because we don't want to stand out, be different, if by doing that, the compromises are such that we no longer show some of the same things Jesus did in this world. Again, musings, things I'm thinking about, and inviting you to as well. All right. So, verse 21, when Jesus had crossed over in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him. So he stayed by the seashore. Again, this is common. He could be heard, right? The acoustics on the boat, talking to the large crowd, it all worked. And then one of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and seeing him fell at his feet. All right. So the synagogue. Okay. So during this day and time, you would have had the temple in Jerusalem. And the best way to think about it is the temple was like ground zero for worshiping. If you were a Jewish man, Jewish woman, it was ground zero for your worship. Locally, the places that you gathered with other fellow believers, your Jewish men and women who you were in community with, would be the local synagogue. Okay? Often, and we don't know here, but if I remember my history correct, Jairus is a very Roman name. And so there was a lot of supporters of synagogues, financial supporters of synagogues, that were not born Jewish, but they were God-fearers and they cared. But these synagogues were places where it was the local place where Jewish faith was practiced. And a lot of them, as we'll see in the book of Acts, had benefactors and other people which the Bible calls God-fearers. They feared God. So they had been somewhat in the community, but might not have fully converted yet. Some of them had. Some of them were still these God-fearers, but they were a larger part, or a part of the larger community. All right, anyway, so that's a little bit about synagogues. And he earnestly employed him after he bowed down. My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she'll get well. And Jesus went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. A woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years that endured much at the hands of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. After hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and just reached out and touched his cloak. For she thought, if I just touch his garments, I will get well. Listen to this. Here's this word again. Immediately, The flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. So, whatever happened in this moment, my friends, she knew that she knew that she knew that she was well just by touching the hem of Jesus' garment. Immediately, Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth, turned around the crowd and said, "Who touched my garments?" His disciples said to him, "Jesus, you see the crowd pressing in, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" Like the disciples, they sometimes just miss the point. And they're not seeing what Jesus is seeing, and they're like, "How can you tell who touched you, Jesus?" Excuse me. And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction." This is what I love about Jesus, is that power over the wind and waves, the elements, power over the spiritual realm, and now spiritual over power, authority over the body, disease, anything that has to do with our well-being. Jesus exercised that authority, and this is like what's interesting about this one, it is like a passive authority. Like he did not, well, anyway, the way that, I'm just going to say the way the text reads. The way the text reads, Jesus didn't know this woman was coming to touch him. And only reason he knew something had happened is that the power, what's the phrasing here? Let me make sure I get this right. Immediately, Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth. Okay, so Jesus knew that something had been dispersed from him to someone else in the crowd. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Think about all the people that were touching him. Remember the disciples? Everybody's touching you. You're in a crowd, my friend. Everybody's touching you. So lots of people were touching him, but not everybody was getting healed, and the power was not going from him. There was something that activated. I'm just going to go with the basics of the text here. Something was activated when the woman came with faith. When she came to Jesus with faith and said, "If I can only touch his garments, I will be fine." That activated something in this whole scenario that brought forth healing. Okay? And Jesus knew it had proceeded forth. So this great miracle happens, this crazy supernatural, like so many elements here of who Jesus is and how he works and how the power that resided, I'm going to say it this way, the power that resided with Jesus, given from God, because he is the very Son of God, how it works in this world as Jesus walked through this world. There's some things here we can learn about it. And that Jesus, when the woman was terrified, right? The woman fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her. There it is again, right? Scared to death. Witnesses Jesus' authority and is fearful and trembling. But Jesus says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." Daughter, you're a part of my family. Your faith, right? Your faith has made you well. We've heard that phrase before. The time we heard it before was the paralytic, chapter 2, when he says, y'all's faith, your all's, multiple ones here, has made this man well, referring to the friends that let the paralytic down through the roof. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. So there's this beautiful invitation, kindness, compassion that Jesus offers, even as the woman is dealing with the fear and the aftermath of what happened. And while he was still speaking, like we get, this is a great cut scene, by the way. This is like multiple things are happening at one time. While he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official and saying, your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore? So again, Jairus was with Jesus, witnessing this, walking him through the crowd to get to his daughter, who's at the doorstep of death. Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, don't be afraid any longer. Fear, again, surrounds these places. Like there's an overwhelming, the best I could say, like there's an overwhelming sense when we're near Jesus that there's something holy and sacred that is happening. And sometimes our body and our senses don't know fully what to do with it. But we will see this phrase a lot throughout the book of Mark. We've seen it a lot here just in these four stories. It showed up in every one of these four stories, right? A version of this. Do not be afraid any longer, only believe. And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and the sons of thunder, i.e., James and John, the brother of James. And John, the brother, okay. Except Peter and James and John, the brother of, said right before James. And these two were known as the sons of thunder. Anyway, they came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion, and the people loudly weeping and wailing. And entering in, he said to them, why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep. Oh my goodness. They, the people here, began laughing at him, but putting them all out, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, Peter, James, and John, and entered the room where the child was. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha Koum, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. There's that word again. Immediately the girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. And immediately they were completely astounded. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said something should be given to her to eat. Okay? So now Jesus exercises his authority over death. And they were all completely astounded. And again, one of the strange things that happens here in the book of Mark is we've got another request not to tell anyone about this. Now, what's interesting is when everything is said and done, and Peter is giving this information to Mark many years later, at least the way the tradition goes, Peter's telling the story freely, okay? He's not hiding it. He's not, because now everything has been done. But why would Jesus say, do not tell anyone about this? And we got earlier in the chapter, I forgot to mention this, but the man possessed by demons, he was given strict orders to go and tell everyone about what he saw. Now, different location, different people, possibly, yes, but we'll have to keep on playing this question out, my friends. All right. And I love, again, the compassion that Jesus has for her family. And I love the fact that we get this last little thing. I don't know why this always makes me smile, but he said that something should be given to her to eat. It's almost like, yeah, something supernatural just happened to her, and she's hungry. She's been dead a while. Let's get her something to eat. Can somebody get her something to eat? She's hungry. Like it's good for her to have food right now. But just this really, I love the place where the practical and the spiritual meat in Jesus. Because all the supernatural things that Jesus did were showing up on the earth with real people in real time. And it's that place where the sacred, the divine meets us in our day-to-day lives. Those are the holy moments. Like, they're not always these huge, the clouds have parted. Like the fact that like some of these things, like the crossing of the boat, only a few people witnessed. Only a few people probably witnessed that the woman with the hemorrhage, what happened there. There was only a small group that saw her and understood all of what happened. But these were places where God's power through the person of Jesus Christ was showing up and making itself known in the world. All right. All right. So we've got these 4 stories that tell the authority of Jesus. And so we're just done with chapter 5, and like think about all the ground that Mark has already covered for a reader hearing about Jesus for the first time. That's kind of where we're at, where we're heading, and what's going on. So I hope this has been good for you. We'll keep moving along. Next week we'll pick up in chapter 6. So again, read chapter 6 as many times as you can, because if you read it before we talk about it, I think that number 1, you will see things in a whole new light. And 2, you might not fully agree with me sometimes because of you had read it and you're like, but what about this? And that's the big disadvantage about doing this in this context, is that there's no facilitation. There's no back and forth. I can't hear from anyone. So if there are things that come up that you see that you want to push back against or ask questions about, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to engage you, because I'm here because I know I need to be doing this. And I'm here so that those that sometimes feel lost or overcome in the winds and the waves of this world can find a place to have safe harbor, retreat, and rest, so they can get back out there on the sea and face the waves and the wind that is just a part of living everyday life. So have a great week, my friends, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks for showing up and being present.